Okay, let's get rolling. Well, welcome. We are so glad that you're here. Welcome to Interview Success, before, during, after, all the things. And we just wanted to cover a few quick reminders before we get started. As you probably heard when you joined the meeting, this is being recorded. And later on, when we turn off the slides, if you'd like to turn on your camera, you're more than welcome to do that. We also want you to know that we will be leveraging the chat throughout our discussion. And so you can feel free to chat questions to everyone. Though if you're more comfortable, feel free to send them directly to me, Susanna Kren, if you prefer to be anonymous, and we will do our absolute best to address those things throughout the meeting. And let's see, I think we can move right into introductions. So again, welcome everyone to our interviewing presentation. My name is Susanna Kren from the Career Center, and I am thrilled, so thrilled to introduce you to a fellow jumbo, Casey Carpenter. I know, woohoo! We're always so glad to have alumni come back and speak with us. Casey is, in addition to being an alumna, is the founder and CEO of Speak and Own It Communications. So thank you for being here, Casey. So glad to have you. And we're hoping just at the beginning of the presentation, if we could get things rolling by having you tell us some ways to be prepared. I know students here listening may have interviews for a job, it might be for an internship or a graduate program, and how we can be confident and prepared. Let's move us ahead. Admitting people as we speak. Here we are, before, during, and after, and the before.
Would you like me to take it away?
Yes, please do.
Awesome. Okay. So hello, everybody. It's really awesome to be back here with you. I love my jumbos. Love, love, love them. So let's just go ahead and get rolling, because there are some things that you can definitely do before, during, and after your interview. So why don't we frame them in that way? And we'll start with how to prepare before your interview. So I mean, one of the things that might make you all laugh and get a smile is that I'm an introvert, big time, which means that for me, if I don't prepare, it really impacts my confidence. And I don't know if there's anybody out there like me, whether you're introverted or extroverted, it really does make sense to prepare. So I would recommend starting by researching the employer. Who is it that you're going to be meeting with, and what have they been working on lately? You know, clearly you can go to the company website, you can pull down media and see what they're doing in the news. Look for what challenges or opportunities that they might be facing, and some other ideas, some other things that you might think about researching would be their history, your current position, and future prospects. So look at trade journals, professional organizations, as well as media. So don't stop there. Research the person you're going to be meeting with as well. So look at their LinkedIn profile, even try Googling that person and see what you can find out about their interests. You know, what organizations or associations do they belong to? Maybe what position do they hold? If they're an officer within an organization, you can get a sense of how involved that they are with it. And what's their alma mater? Where did they go to school? So see what common threads you can uncover, so then you can weave them into the conversation when you have that conversation. And this really does boost your confidence, because how nice is it to walk in and you can say something to someone, oh, I noticed that you are president of the XYZ Society. That's really great. My uncle goes there. So making those connections really goes a long way. Think also in terms of their mission, the culture, and any challenges. So this gives you a 360-degree perspective, and you can get that on the Career Center site. at careers.tufts.edu. You're not going to walk out of here without knowing that particular URL. So the career exploration tools are listed in the career communities on the site. Now, another way to really be prepared is to find out the nature and format of the interview. I can't tell you how important this is, because you'll ask the recruiter if you're going to be meeting with one single person from HR, or are you also going to meet with a hiring manager and or potential coworkers. You want to make sure that you've covered as many bases as possible so that when you walk in there virtually, okay, I'm meeting with the HR person. There shouldn't be anybody else there. I know for me, I had a bad experience once when I did not ask. And of course, this was an in-person meeting, and I didn't have enough copies of my resume with me. Now, we know that that's not really happening virtually, but just mentally, you want to know who's going to be in the room. So try to get their names, try to research each person there as well, and find out, are there going to be case questions? So these are typical of consulting or technical interviews. And again, knowing these things in advance will help keep you from being blindsided, and you will be super prepared. Now, another place to look would be alumni or other connections. Can you talk with any Tufts alumni who work there? So look at the Herd, of course, and LinkedIn to find individuals who may have those connections for you. So let's move on to preparing your mindset for success. I mean, it's also all about where your mind is and thinking that you got this, you've done the work, and you are ready. Do a mental dress rehearsal. So when I had important interviews, I would visualize myself in whatever outfit I was wearing, shaking the person's hand. You can still do that even though it's virtual. We'll talk a little later about what you need to do to come into the room and how you can show up. But I would still say that's a very valuable exercise. Think about your fit with the position. Why are you a strong match? Which transferable skills and relevant experience do you bring to the position? And another thing is to remember your goals and the employer's goals. If you think about it, you both have similar goals. So the employer wants to hire the most qualified applicant for this position. That's what they want. And for you, remembering that you are interviewing them as well. So you want to make sure it's a good place for you. Get information about the position and the organization and determine whether the position itself is a good match for you. You're going to want to know about their workplace culture and how they plan to onboard you if you get hired. And I can't tell you how important this is because things have changed in the workplace. You know this. We've all been dispersed due to the pandemic, so things are being done differently at organizations now. So new hire orientations may not be done in person. You want to know how they are done. So ask how the company gets people up to speed because they're going to be invested in your success. Now, I mentioned that the interviewer wants to bring on the most qualified candidate, and they're evaluating whether you can do the job. They're also assessing your fit with the team. They know who the people are and the different personalities with the organization overall, and they're going to be selling the organization and the position. So this is not about the employer judging you at all. They're looking for the best candidate, and you're both mutually ensuring that the role is a good fit. That's really important because you want to love it, you want to be happy, and look forward to going to work. So in a minute, I'm going to share some commonly asked questions that you may encounter in an interview, and you may have heard some of them yourself. If you put yourself in an interviewer's position, you can imagine how they would assess your ability to do the job based on the job description. So in fact, if you review the job description itself, you may be able to guess what you're going to be asked. So Susanna, could you please share some sample questions?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, let me stop that share. And again, at this point, everyone, we're going to have the slides off for just a bit. So if you're comfortable and you'd like to turn your camera on, great, although no pressure, but know that that's an option. So first off, excuse me, just wanted to say, Casey, I so appreciate what you said about looking back to the job description and thinking about, if I were the interviewer, what would I ask this person? Because I feel like with most interviews, they're not out to trip you up. They're not to and I want to reassure everyone. I feel like most of the time, again, it is that, how are we going to assess that this person has the skills and the experiences that we're looking for? So with that, common questions. Some of you will know these already. You'll recognize them from interviews that you've had. And I would say, though, at first, that the number one thing is it's impossible to anticipate absolutely every single question you're going to get. And so it's good to know that, to just let yourself off the hook. There's no way you're going to know everything. But that said, today we are going to talk about some strategies for addressing some of these common ones where yeah, I'm probably going to get that. So the first category is what I would call getting to know you. And if you've ever heard "tell me about yourself," which when I've done interviews, it's like, gosh, not tell me about yourself. So if you ever feel like, how am I supposed to answer that? I am in your support group. But that is one of them for sure. And employers often use that just to ease into the conversation. This category of getting to know you also include questions about your strengths, your weaknesses, your working style. The employer wants to understand your motivations for applying. So they might ask you, hey, what do you think makes you a good fit for this position? Why are you interested in this position in our organization? So knowing that, doing that reflection piece and knowing that is so important. And going along with that, they might also ask you about your goals for the future. So you may have heard before, oh, tell us where you see yourself in 5 years. And that's also on my not favorite questions list, but glad to talk strategies for that. But, just the idea that you've thought about things, you've thought about how this job might, or grad program or whatever it is, internship might set you up for meeting your goals in the future. So getting to know you, number one. Next category involves education. And think of this as everything you've done at Tufts. And if you're a younger student, it could incorporate high school as well. But it's important to know that any of that coursework you might mention on your resume, classes you've taken, stories you've told in your cover letter about activities at Tufts, anything with that is fair game. So it's really important to be familiar with your documents, especially as you're going into an interview. The third category, I would say, is third and final. I like things in threes, is of course your past and your current experiences. So that could be, what have you liked and disliked about past internships or summer jobs or volunteering experiences? What did you learn and which skills did you develop in those past positions? And some of you may also have encountered what we call behavioral interviewing questions that get at the heart of those experiences. And those will often start with, tell me about a time when, fill in the blank. And so it's great to have this repository, for lack of a better term, of stories in your mind of things that you've done or experiences that you've had that really illustrate the qualities that an employer is looking for. So that might be something like, tell me about a time when you had to juggle competing priorities. And I feel like as students, you're all really good at that, or you're developing that skill just naturally. Or it could also be, tell me about a time when you led a successful project or effort, or tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker or a teammate and how you resolved that. So those behavioral pieces, questions are important to prepare your stories. And finally, as you probably expect me to say, practice, practice, practice. It's so important. I really feel that interviewing is such an important skill, and yet it's one that I will admit in college, I didn't practice very much, which feels like the ultimate irony for someone who works in a career center. But there you go. I didn't practice it a lot. And I could have done better. I could have had better interviews had I started practicing early. So please know that in addition to scheduling a mock interview with the Career Center, there's also a great resource that we offer that's called Big Interview. And it's a platform that you sign up for. And once you sign up, there are a bunch of great short and long interview training videos. And you also have the ability to, if you're a brave person, record yourself answering questions and then review it to say, where could I have done better? How would I tweak that? So at the end of the presentation, we will be sure to put a link for Big Interview in the chat, because that's a great platform that we have that if you haven't already used it, can be really helpful. So, okay, at this point, we're going to take a quick pause. And with any of the things that we've discussed thus far as common questions, the pieces that Casey mentioned about the before and the preparation pieces, if you have any questions about those things, you're welcome to enter them into the chat. And again, if you're comfortable with mentioning things to everyone, great. Or if not, you can send it directly to me. But we'll take just a quick second, a few seconds. And if not, no questions. If you think of it later, that's great too.
So Susanna, while we're waiting for those to come through, I just have to comment on something you said about practice. And I didn't practice either, because you know what?
We could have a club.
we could have a club, because I didn't know what to practice. And
Yes.
I think that what is so key about what you're doing here this evening is you're really giving everyone a structure and a framework so that you have a place to start. I had absolutely no idea. So
yeah,
very often I would be just blindsided by questions that probably were quite basic, but I didn't have the fluidity. And what's great about practice is it really gets in your bones. So even though it may feel rote, when you have to deliver that message, you're going to be on and you're going to feel really good about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we did just have a question come in, a few questions. Thank you, everybody.
Great.
So we'll address those quickly. So the first one is, how do you answer that? I teased it already. Where do you see yourself in X number of years if you don't know exactly what you want to do? So love it. Great question. I think that is something where if you'd like to come and strategize with a career advisor, we can help you figure that out for your individual situation. But generally, I would say that you don't have to be super specific. I think people sometimes fear, oh, I'm going to have to say, well, I want to be in this job in this type of organization. And that's really not the case. But what they do want to see, the potential employer, is maybe some overall themes, like, I'm committed to social justice work. And so whether that takes place in a nonprofit or a government setting, my hope is that I will be impacting the refugee populations, because that's such a strong interest of mine. Something where thematically it kind of fits with where I think I might be headed, but again, it doesn't have to be quite as specific as an individual job or anything. And how do you recommend answering? Tell me about yourself. I've given all the questions that are. I'm glad I have people who want to hear that. So we will actually be getting to that one in just a bit. So save that. We're going to get to that. And great question there, because yes, who you are, and they do already get some pieces from your resume. So we'll be kind of discussing that. No need to repeat your resume verbatim. You guys are so great at thinking of all the things I want to tell you. What are some ways to, I know, I'm like, oh yes. So this is another one we're going to cover. What are some ways to brainstorm answers for questions about weaknesses? And how do you pick a weakness that is legitimate, but won't interfere with your ability to do the job? Oh my gosh, such a great question. So we're going to cover that as well. And the one piece I'll say here is, yes, I completely agree with, if you're picking a weakness, it needs to be a good weakness in the sense that it can't be a deal breaker. And the example I use for this is, you're applying for a job that requires a lot of public speaking, and public speaking terrifies you. You don't want to say that. Well, my weakness is public speaking. It terrifies me. If that is a core component of the job, I would say to the person, you know what, there are ways to strengthen yourself with that, but let's not give them that information. There are other things that we can pick. More good questions. We'll do a couple more and move forward. My resume has changed a good bit since I applied for a position. Should I share an updated resume with my interviewer? Oh, when you have an interview coming up. I love that idea. I think if you've had an improvement in your documents, you think, hey, I haven't had a chance to tell them this. That's a great way to touch base and show that you're taking initiative. Dear so-and-so, I'm looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow or next week or whatever. I wanted to provide you with up-to-date materials, as I have recently added short version of what you're adding. Great. How do you, this relates to what you were talking about, Casey. How do you best answer a question you're completely blindsided by, which is the worst? So I will say, you have one get out of jail free card, which is, you can tell I played a lot of Monopoly as a kid, which is, if someone asks you a question, you go, oh gosh, and your brain is just going mile a minute. You have one thing you can do, which is to say one time. You'll see why you only say it once. You know, that is a great question. Let me think about that. Let me think about that. Pause, brief pause. I can't pause for too long. But if I were to do that many times, gosh, that's a really great question. It would become a predictable pattern, and that wouldn't be a good thing. But that's your one, kind of buy yourself some time. And let's do one more before we get into our very exciting during interview pieces that we need to talk about. Oh, great question. I know I say that about everything, but they really are. One thing I find difficult navigating is how to discuss salaries in both informational interviews and negotiating salaries for actual interviews. What's the best way so that you don't get caught off balance shorthand? And great question. I will say, in an initial first interview, it's likely not the time that you'll be discussing salary. However, there are sites like salary.com, Glassdoor, where you can approximate ranges. It's great to have a range in mind. I would say, though, if you're asked a question that you don't feel comfortable answering right off the bat, know that you have the option to say, they say, oh, what's your salary? What's your ideal salary range? And you say, would it be okay if I got back with you about that in the next few days? I'm really interested in this position, and just like to make sure that I come up with a range that works best for both of us. So it's okay to say, I'd like to take a little time. And then of course you can come and talk with your friends in the Career Center as just strategies for answering that question. So thank you so much, everyone, for those great questions. And I'm going to, at this point, we've talked a bit about the before, and I want to turn it back over to Casey to discuss what you can do during an interview to boost your professional presence as well as your confidence.
Okay, thank you. And those were awesome questions, really spot on. And I'm excited because we're going to be answering them in a very creative way. All right, so here's what you can do to prepare your stage so that you have maximum impact and you really stand out in your interviewer's mind. Because think of it like this, now that we are essentially broadcasting from our homes, we want to present as professional an environment as possible. And presenting virtually is really not drastically different from presenting in person. But let's talk about some of the things that you can do to amplify your presence if you're on Zoom or really any other virtual platform. First thing, I say first impressions really say a lot. And in fact, 85% of the information that is stored in your brain comes through your eyes. So therefore, your visual impression is so important. So think about what goes into that. It's your environment, it's your lighting, it could be noise, it could be what do you have behind you? For example, some people use virtual backgrounds. Some, believe it or not, I have been in professional meetings where somebody was presenting sitting on an unmade bed. Come on, make that bed.
Oh yeah,
So,
don't do that.
right, yeah, don't do that. Check your technology and your bandwidth also, because if you've got other people who are in your same location that might be doing meetings or perhaps they're streaming, those are things that are going to affect your bandwidth. So you really want to make sure that you've got all of those bases covered before your interview. So that's preparing your environment, right? Now prepare yourself. Consider your nonverbal communication, things like your eye contact, your posture. These speak volumes when are in a virtual environment like this. So the camera actually tends to pull your facial features down. I'm going to show you. If I don't put a little half smile on my face, so while I was listening to Susanna, I was sitting here listening engaged. If I don't do that, I look like I'm mad or I look like I'm sad. So you want to put a half smile on your face so that you have a pleasant, engaged expression. Think of the 3 A's. You want to be awake, alert, and animated. And one way that you can do that, and many of you may have noticed, wow, I'm looking at Casey present. She looks like she's right across the table from me. Uh-huh, because you know what I'm doing? I'm looking directly into the camera instead of looking at all of the boxes on the screen. So when I look into the camera, it really simulates that I am making eye contact with you. So if there's one thing that I want you to make sure you do that you've learned from me tonight, make that really important eye contact. It says a lot. Another thing you can do, think about filler words when you speak. So they can sound like, yeah, so, well, like, sorta, kinda. They make you sound hesitant and uncertain. So as best as you can, really amp up your awareness about filler words and try not to use them at all in your interview. When you think about the speed at which you're speaking, speak with a measured, moderate pace. I like to say that you allow yourself to pause and think before you respond. So let's say the interviewer tosses you a question. You don't have to respond right away. You don't have to have that pressure on yourself. You can take it in. Right. I'm glad you asked that. Okay, so this is what I think about that question, and you give your answer. You're allowed to give yourself a little micro pause before you respond. Another thing that's important is to be aware of the subtle differences between in-person and virtual interviewing. So you may need to really amp up your body language to demonstrate how engaged you are, and also it keeps you energized. What happens on video is there's something about the camera that diminishes not only our facial expression, but also what we're doing in terms of body language. So it means that you might have to turn it on a little bit more and really gesture and lean into the camera so that the interviewer can see that you're engaged. And when you think about how you actually speak, consider your vocal qualities. So these are things like volume, how loudly or softly you speak. If you speak so softly, they're not going to hear you. You want to speak with an appropriate volume, right? Pacing, not speaking too quickly, enunciation, making sure that they hear the beginning and the ending of every single word. And then, of course, your pauses are really important. You can strategically pause for a moment just to think, the way I just did. I looked off a little bit and then I came back to the camera. So, what do you think you should do with your phone or your device? Well, this is part of your whole visual image as well, as if you've got a phone sitting there beside you. So needless to say, we should not hear ringing phones. Put it on do not disturb and out of your reach so that you're not multitasking, because guess what? Your interviewer is going to notice if you're constantly looking down and you're distracted. They're going to say, oh, this person's on their phone. And you don't want them to have that impression of you. So, Susanna, tell them what we have in store for them now.
Oh my gosh, everyone, exciting times. And no, thank you for mentioning the piece about phones. We've heard that from employers. And I thought, wait, that wouldn't happen. But we have actually heard employers say students, and I don't even think it was in reference to Tufts students. It was just people in general where they said, oh yeah, I could tell that so-and-so was checking their phone. I thought, oh my gosh, during an interview, but what we're going to do now is we're going to make this come alive. We are going to do a quick role play where I am going to be the interviewer and Casey is lucky enough to be the candidate. And I'm going to ask her 3 questions. And so what we'd like you to do is listen to her answers and pay attention to what she might be doing well. There could be those things, but also particularly what she could strengthen and what you think she could do better with the answer, because we're going to pause the action after each question of the 3 and give you a chance to enter that into the chat. So you can help us out and we will learn together. So, hi, Casey, and welcome. Glad that you're here. Why don't you tell me a bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Well, I was born in New York City and I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is a suburb. I would say that's maybe about 10 miles from New York City. You take Route 4 west and you get there. And I went to private school for 7 years. I was really lucky. I went to wonderful private school, and Tufts was my first choice, right? So I was super excited when I was accepted. And the reason why I'm here today is I like the idea that this is an entry-level position and with the opportunity to lead projects, because I'm really into that. And in my entrepreneurial leadership course, I studied topics like organizational leadership, and all of those things relate to project management. So even though I haven't really done project management, like in real life, I haven't really done that, and I haven't really supervised anybody before, I'm looking forward to being a part of the team and learning from everyone.
Okay, and stop. All right, so if you could please, volunteers, enter in the chat and maybe address it to everyone so that we don't have as many duplicates. What's one thing that Casey did well in that answer? What do you think she did well? Okay. Oh, yeah. We have some good answers thus far. She did look at the camera. She was enthusiastic. Both things that I liked for sure.
Good.
Yep. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Good pace. Yep. I think that the enthusiasm, the nonverbals were working well. Thank you for those answers, everybody. Another one. Yep. Oh, you just said what I was going to say. That's great. I love that. She related her reported interest, what she's interested in, to the company and the job role, good volume and articulation. These are all great answers. And she mentioned relevant coursework. That was another one. So I'm glad we're covering things that she did well, because I will say very rarely is an answer you say, oh man, I really bombed that answer. There's always something good to take from an answer. So we want to underscore that. Sometimes if you think, oh geez, I really mess that up. And rarely is that the case. But that said, let's move to ways that she could improve. If you could put in the chat something that perhaps she could do differently, or something that could be strengthened about that, tell me about yourself. Yes, too much detail on her, even though her hometown is lovely, and we know that, and her school, I'm sure, was wonderful as well. But the temptation with tell me about yourself can often be to dive into just a little too much about the past. I've had people tell me before in practice about their siblings, and and it's like, it's great if we were meeting for coffee, I might want to know that, but not in an interview. And let's see. Oh, yes, she highlighted her weakness of not having experience. She said, so, even though I haven't really done this, if you find yourself saying that, well, as you're practicing, yeah, find a way to strike any of those things where you're tempted to. I think it comes from a good place. People want to be humble. They don't want to brag, but an interview is not the time to do that. And so good pickup there. Say, I don't have something. Yep, lack of experience regarding supervising and project management. Yep. You guys nailed it. Well done. The other piece I would say quickly about, tell me about yourself, because I know that came up in the chat earlier. I tend to treat that question as an opportunity. So if that's the first question, how can I tell the employer, yes, definitely things about myself, but ideally, when I'm mentioning past experiences, I'm not repeating everything from my resume, but maybe I'm picking a few things because I know that those are the things that they're going to care about the most. So, and tell me about yourself. Maybe I mention, I've done this, and I think it really matches well with this position because you have the ability to make that sell before they've even asked you. And again, show that enthusiasm for the position, for the organization when you're doing your wrap up. It's almost like, a little bit about your present. I'm a Tufts junior majoring in such and such, that's fine to cover. So a little bit about your past, again, the relevant pieces for that employer. And then you wrap up with maybe a future oriented statement like, that's why I'm so excited to be, or whatever feels natural for you, your wording, but I'm excited to be here today because I want to have this opportunity to do blah, blah, blah for your organization. So that is, tell me about yourself. And okay, now we're back to business. I got to put my interviewer hat on again for question number 2 of 3. So, Casey, can you tell me about one of your weaknesses?
Gosh, it's really hard to think of anything. Oh, okay. Well, I have a strong work ethic and I'm accustomed to doing well. So I tend to be a perfectionist in all of my projects.
Okay, pause, time out. Now this one, this one is a little bit easier perhaps to move right into. What could you improve about that weakness? And anyone who wants to answer that in the chat, feel free, go ahead. What could she do differently? Yes, I agree with that. Elaborate more. It was a short answer, true enough. Yes, thank you for that answer too. This response says she paints something that normally would be something that people see as a strong selling point as a weakness. Yes. Yes, not a real weakness. Being a perfectionist, or gosh, I'm just such a hard worker, is one of those like patting yourself on the back. I work too hard. That could be true. Oh, yep, she did. We made her sound arrogant on purpose. This says she sounded a bit arrogant when she said she couldn't think of a weakness. True enough. And you would be surprised, though, at how many times that happened. People kind of haven't thought about it. Someone else asked me in the chat what could be a good example for this. And while we, unfortunately, due to time, can't redo all these role plays with all the goods, what I will tell you is that here's your plan for weaknesses. It should be something real, like not I'm a perfectionist, that could actually be a weakness, something that's not a deal breaker, as we discussed, so it's not related to core components of the job description. And it's something where you can show that you're improving on this thing. So to give you an example from my own life, because I'm happy to put myself out there, I struggle with delegating things a lot. And it's problematic because sometimes that can amount to trying to exert ownership over things where I should really be giving something away. And that, that can be a weakness in that my projects may suffer from the lack of feedback from other people. So what I have done, in addition to just reflecting on that and thinking, gosh, where does that come from and why I might feel that way? I have, in the beginning of projects, thought to myself, okay, what are those pieces where I could easily give this away? I've created more of a roadmap in the beginning that allowed me to say, okay, I'm going to ask for help with this. I've been increasingly aware of my need to ask for help. And then check in as necessary, but really be comfortable giving that away to someone. And so again, I'm kind of trying to show whatever that weakness is, here's what I'm doing about it. It's not just, this is the weakness, end of story. So that's the short version on weakness questions. I will say, come and talk with an advisor because we're happy to unpack your individual one with you in an appointment for sure. And finally, question number 3. Let us see. Casey, could you please tell me about a time when you had a problem on the job and what you did to solve it?
Sure. Well, I worked on a really intensive class project for one of my classes, and we had a hard time figuring out how we would schedule our meetings around our different courses and activities. Everybody was just so busy. And the person who was in charge of our team, another senior, was really unhelpful. And they were really inflexible with the process. I mean, they just made everything harder for the group. At the end of the day, here's what I did. I decided to form my own group with some of the other team members, and we just went ahead and did the work by ourselves. I was kind of hoping that the professor would step in and help us, but nothing happened there.
Okay, so there was an example of a behavioral question. We're moving again to improvement mode. What is something in the chat that you think that Casey could have done better with her answer? Any thoughts? While you're reflecting on that, I did want to address one question that came up in the chat regarding the weakness piece, which was, can you frame something like ADHD or a learning disability as a weakness, but something you're adjusting to? Or is that not recommended? If it were me, and that's a great question, I would say I wouldn't choose that one because, I like to encourage people to choose things that are more behavioral versus something where, you have that and it's common to have disabilities, of course. But I don't know that I would draw attention to something like that in an interview just because of the potential for it to be perceived negatively. But I think you could kind of pick something that would be, probably a little less personal, but still, a behavioral piece that you could change. And getting back to the chat. Yes, good answer. When Casey answered that question, she said she hoped that by saying she hoped that the professor would step in, she was showing she has trouble resolving problems on her own. I do think that's the case. And she didn't, yes, another great answer in the chat. She didn't really solve the problem. It wasn't a good example of teamwork, leaving someone out and relying on the professor, or, or even in her answer saying, oh, we just left this, yeah, we just did it ourselves, but relying on the professor rather than thinking of a solution that incorporates everyone. Great answer. Yes, another good answer. She basically threw the teammate under the bus. She did. And yep, didn't resolve the problem. I completely agree. So thank you for those answers. The reason we want to show you this, we want to illustrate this particular piece, is that conflict is something you will run into. You'll run into conflicts, disagreements, and you'll have to handle it in a professional way, controlling what you can control and continuing to present yourself in a professional manner. So it's a great question for just the professionalism theme that we have going here. And you're absolutely right. You hit upon the pieces about how she didn't say what she did to solve a problem. And this could have been lack of preparation and thinking about that, but it basically devolved into a bashing the teammate, bashing the professor. And if you haven't prepared, it's kind of easy for that to happen, to focus on the negative versus what she could have done in that situation. And here I'll spin it for the good piece, is she could have said, we were working, I had a class project for one of my Tufts classes, and we had a really hard time just juggling schedules, figuring out when we would meet. So I took the initiative to set up a poll for us where we could lay out all the times, all the options, and figure out what worked the best. And then we could look at it objectively and say, here's when most of us can meet. And then in addition to that, I went the extra mile to meet with our teammate who couldn't be there, to just fill that person in on what they had missed. So that's focused on what I've contributed to make something better. And that's really the gist of it with these behavioral questions, is what did you do? What was your solution? How did you achieve those results? And in a brief way, walking the listener through that. So any thoughts to add to that, Casey?
Well said, my friend. I think you said it. The main objective we're getting to here is that these things happen in the real world. And when you're in the interview, it's giving some perspective as to how you would handle things when you're really at the workplace. So it is really important to think it through and to really think about the problem solving aspect of it. What can you do to move things along in a way that resolves any conflict that might be happening?
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. And again, I would encourage everyone here to have that conversation about interview strategy with someone in the Career Center. We can discuss those questions with you, the ones that you feel like are a struggle, like, should I say this? Should I say this? That's something that we commonly do with people and help you brainstorm answers that you can feel good about. So let's return. I'm going to pass the baton to Casey for one more slide. She is going to tell us what to do after your interview. And these are some of my favorite and often overlooked pieces.
Awesome. Thank you. So, what's really important to do after your interview? Well, let's say that you've done everything right. Okay, so that means you've done your pre-interview preparation. You've also done a nice job with the interview itself, and you posed thoughtful questions to your interviewer. So don't let up now. You're doing great. Don't let up now. Here's what I really want to impress upon you is that many people fail to say thank you. And according to an account temp survey of human resources managers, 3 out of 4 applicants don't even bother to send a thank you note. I mean, that just floored me. 3 out of people. So there are 75% of people who are just not even saying thank you for your time, thank you for what I learned, nothing. So I invite you, be part of the 25% who stand out. You can definitely add a positive impression to an already positive connection by saying thank you. Really important. And in fact, I think it can really make the difference between them considering you over another candidate.
Yes, absolutely. And we've heard that from employers, definitely. Moving forward.
Yes. So moving forward, you want to contact the Tufts Career Center. And Susanna, take that one away. Why should they
I
talk to you?
Oh my goodness. I will say, besides the fact that we're just so invested in your success and in you finding work that you find fulfilling, or a graduate program that really excites you. And it could be a job, an internship, volunteering. It can look like a lot of things, but we want you to feel ready to interview. We would also encourage you, again, if you receive that offer and you're not sure about the decision, maybe it's talking about the salary or negotiating, please come talk to us. If you end up using Big Interview, which I will put in the chat momentarily, you want to review those videos you've recorded, you can talk to us. And also just, a deeper dive. We mentioned some sample questions, but again, please keep in mind this, because this is an overview, we really encourage you to come and talk with us about your particular questions. We hit some of the high points, but we also know that you have things that you would like to know based on your experiences and where you're comfortable and where you feel like you'd like to do some more work. So please come and talk to us anytime.
And those two very important words. We thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for playing full out, asking the questions, challenging yourselves, getting better. Thank you.
And
And
we're going to go ahead. I will stop the share. I am going to post that Big Interview link as promised. And we're here for another few minutes. If you want to ask any other questions, that could be in the chat, that could be on camera, totally up to you, but we will keep an eye on the chat. And let me go ahead and post this Big Interview link. You can also find it on our website in the Learn More About Preparing for Interviews section of the website. Let's see, I'm going to post this right here though, so that people have it. But yes, feel free to pose any other questions in the chat if there's something in particular that you would like to have us talk more about.
And what a great thing and a great resource you're providing, Susanna. I mean, it just gives that extra level of comfort and confidence when you've got to go out and talk to people who perhaps you're meeting for the first time.
Yeah, no, the preparation is really key, and just the whatever it takes, like we've been talking about, for you to show your strengths to the fullest, because you guys are amazing, and we really want to help you tell that story to a potential employer or to a grad school or whatever it might be. So you're welcome. You're welcome.
Well said. Well
There's
said.
thank yous in the chat. You're most welcome. And again, happy to address any lingering questions for anyone that's still around. Just let us know. We also wanted to let you know, if you have friends who couldn't make it, we're going to be putting this up on our YouTube channel. So
thank you.
Thank you.
It's always nice to hear a voice in the virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Whoever's left, let us know if you have any questions. And thanks for being here.
Oh, there's a question there in the chat.
Perfect. Oh, great. Thank you. How should you choose? What are the most important things to highlight from your resume? I love that question. And I know I do say that about everything, but it's true. So many good questions. So what I would say about that is, as you probably guess, it varies depending on what you're applying for. So knowing that I only have so much time to answer a question before I'm kind of overwhelming someone with information, I'd want to pick maybe I'd say 2, 3 things to highlight and say a few, a bit more about. So that might be an internship. That might be a course where you did a particularly intensive research paper or project. That might be an activity or volunteering. The nice thing is it can be just about anything, but I think the important thing is that it relates to, again, when you're looking back at that job description, or even the stuff that you've written in a cover letter, what are your strongest selling points for that particular employer? And then you can kind of develop a shorthand for saying that for those things. Did that answer that question? It can be tough. And another thing I would say about that, just that came to mind, is this is why, oh, good. Yes, thank you. Answered it. But at the same time, I would also say, if you're having that, gosh, I don't know, is it worth saying this? Is it not? If you do a mock interview with the Career Center, you can get our feedback around, you know what, probably don't need to mention that. You've got enough stuff already. Or you might say, oh, geez, having looked at your resume, I think that's great experience that you'll want to mention in this interview. So you can kind of get that objective feedback too in a mock interview. Yeah.
Well, I certainly wish the best to everyone, and that everyone lands a position that you really, really love.
Yes, that is always the hope. Want people to be fulfilled, for sure. And thank you. Thank you for being here.